In this video, I'm going to be talking about the set changes coming to the Elder Scrolls Online with the Stonethorn DLC update. If you didn't know, this is already live on PTS as of a few days ago. It hasn't made it to live yet, so these changes are not finalized, but the amount of changes coming to sets is staggering. I cannot understate this. I have never seen so many changes to sets, and most of them are for the better, so if you've had some junk sets you've been hanging on to for years, now's the time to maybe dust them off and try them out again. For the purposes of this video, I'm not going to be talking about the new sets that were added with this DLC. Perhaps we'll do a separate video on that. But I'm just going to go into the existing sets that are changed. I'm not going to go into all of them because I'm not exaggerating when I say it's probably 200 sets that got changed. But I'm going to go into some of the more notable changes because some of the sets were just tweaked a little bit in terms of their values and they're not, really noticeable in terms of what they're going to do. But other sets have been changed completely or enhanced in ways that are going to make them very viable and allow for people to create some really interesting builds. The first set I want to talk about is the Daedric Trickery set. It didn't get a huge change, but the duration of it has been increased by about 60%, which is a huge amount. So this set now has 80% uptime compared to 50%, and it makes it so it's, worth maybe considering choosing. I don't think everyone is going to go use this set, but because of that change, you could at least look at it and be like, maybe I'll give it a try. Before, it was pretty much meh. But now it could actually be used by people for something. Death's Wind had its cooldown reduced in half. This means you're going to get an AoE knockdown every 15 seconds. That's huge. If you're talking about PvP implications, you could potentially be knocking down everyone around you every 15 seconds. Combine this with some other set that knocks people down. You could just be a knockdown build. It could be insane. The Gravestake Collector set got a huge change. The proc chance has been removed entirely, and now this will spawn a Gravestake every time you defeat an enemy. But the catch is it has to be a monster, so this is no longer going to be viable in PvP. This makes it particularly useful for people that are leveling because they tend to have resource management issues, and this should really solve a lot of that for them if they can kill an enemy and get those resources back. Or even Maelstrom Arena. I mean, that's huge implications for Maelstrom Arena right there. Magnus's Gift had its proc chance increased by double. This means 15% of the time you cast a Magicka ability, it's going to negate the cost. That's amazing. That becomes instantly a very good set to consider. So that's a huge change. The Mechanical Acuity set removed the proc chance entirely and now grants a guaranteed critical strike to any skill that can critically strike, which is amazing. I mean, imagine going into PvP and being able to ensure that your ultimate crits. Drop a meteor that crits, or, use Onslaught that crits. This is an absolutely staggering change. I expect to see this a lot in PvP. The Redistributor set, which has long been in the trash pile in Elder Scrolls Online, gets a massive change. Instead of healing over your full health to yourself, now it's going to be anybody. It decreased the healing just a smidgen, but this is huge because this means that if you're, a tank who self-heals or something, if you have like other heals that go out, like I do on my tank build, then you're going to be able to heal teammates if you don't need the healing, which is huge for your group support. And the cooldown is reduced to 1 second, which means this is going to trigger all the time. This is just absolutely staggering. The Shalador's Curse set got a major buff and now triggers on light and heavy attacks, which is okay. But the healing got increased to almost 3,300 health from 600 and added a 1 second cooldown so you can't spam it. But this makes this an amazing set for werewolves who use light attacks very regularly in their rotation. Can you imagine being under 50% health and healing for 3,300 basically every light attack you do? It's going to be very, very hard to kill you if you can do that. The Song of Lamai set, another set that's been on the trash pile for a long time, has had its cooldown reduced from 30 seconds to 3 seconds. That's a 90% reduction time in its cooldown, which is amazing. And now the healing of the set heals you based on the amount of damage done rather than a flat amount. So if it does more damage, it's going to heal you for more damage, which is exceptional. Torg's Pack was tweaked. The major change here is that the increased potency of the enchantment goes up from 30% to 90%. So those weapon damage enchants or crushing enchantments for armor reduction going to be huge on those that are using Torg's Pact. Varen's Legacy, which is one of my all-time favorite sets, got huge changes. The damage was reduced slightly and the window to activate it was reduced a little bit, but the proc chance is now gone. It is guaranteed whenever you block an attack that your next direct damage AoE is going to do an additional 3,000 damage essentially, but it has a 2-second cooldown. So this means you're going to get more overall benefit from this set because if I did a set build on this and it triggers very, very rarely the way it is now. So this is going to be huge. This is going to allow for some tank builds, particularly in PvP, that deal significant damage, I think. The Armor of the Trainee set now is only a 3-piece set with a 1-piece, 2-piece, and 3-piece bonuses of health, magicka, and stamina. So that's kind of cool. I mean, you can mix and match that in there. If you want a one piece of Magicka, you can throw a piece of it on, or one piece of health, or one piece of stamina. I feel like that's going to see a lot of use in a lot of niche builds, and it's just kind of nice to have that there in case you need those extra stats. The Beekeeper set got even more tanky. The 3 and 4 piece bonuses are now health rather than health recovery. And the final bonus of this set, instead of increasing health recovery by 400, increases it by 900. So you're essentially getting a more effective set on the recovery front, in addition to gaining more health. So that's going to be even tankier to kill. The Bloodthorn's Touch set increases the Magicka and stamina generated up to 958 from 660. That's a pretty good improvement. It's about 50%. That means you're going to get a lot of resources back when using the set, and a lot of niche builds use this, particularly in PvP. The Briarheart set, I love the change here. This set no longer has a proc chance. It just gives you, whenever you critically strike, it just gives you the extra weapon damage and the healing from critical strikes by default, and has a 15-second cooldown. But now you don't have to worry about it maybe proccing. It's going to be proccing all the time. So if you have the Briarheart set, make sure you bust that thing out. The Call of the Undertaker set got a huge change. It no longer has a cooldown, and now it triggers off any damage done rather than just light attacks, which means you could basically have minor lifesteal up 100% of the time on whoever you're attacking. And it doesn't seem to be regulated to one target, so you could potentially put this on many targets and become immortal. The Deadwater's Guile set increased the ultimate gain per kill up to 15 from 5. That's a 200% increase, and it adds an additional 129 weapon damage to its 5-piece bonus. So this set just got all around better. If you are a stamina player in PvP that gets lots of kills frequently, this is probably going to be a set you're going to want to check out. The Defiler set has had its proc chance removed, so now it just triggers whenever you deal critical damage, and it's had its damage buffed a little bit. So stamina players using this in PvP are going to love this change. The Draugr's Heritage set had the healing increased, and it reduced the cooldown to 7 seconds from 20, which is amazing. This is another set that AoE knocks down, but when you're low, below 35% health, which means if you combine this with another set like Death's Wind that has knockdown, you can potentially knock everyone down, and then if they get up and start wailing on you again, your health goes under. If their, CC has expired, you knock them down again. By the time it expires again, you knock them down again. You could actually make like a knockdown-o-matic build. Maybe I will. It sounds like fun, but that's a huge change as well. The Griffin's Ferocity set got a pretty big change. It now lasts 10 seconds up from 3 seconds, making it much more useful, and I expect a lot more people to use this set because of that. So if you have this set, try and check this out. The Livewire set has had the cooldown of the set reduced to 6 seconds, and the proc chance is removed. This means that you're going to be able to debuff enemies very much more regularly, making this probably a build that, or a set that some builds will use in order to get that debuff all the time up on enemies around them. Mad Tinkerer is another set that got changed. The damage has been increased slightly, and the proc chance has been removed. So this is going to trigger every time you attack, with the exception that it has a cooldown of now 8 seconds instead of 10. But you don't have to worry about getting, that 10% proc chance or whatever it had before. Now it's just going to trigger every 8 seconds when you're attacking, which is huge. Meridia's Blessed Armor set now causes you to dodge all incoming attacks for 5 seconds after blocking attack, rather than having a 33% chance on blocking, which is huge. This is a big change because it means you're going to get lots of dodges. So if you combine it with a set that rewards you for getting dodges like Tava's Favor or something like that, you're going to be able to generate ultimate very, very regularly. Additionally, the cooldown has been increased to 25 seconds in order to, because the set's been buffed so hard, they don't want you to use it quite as often. The Shadow of the Red Mountain set, once thought to be a good set, but kind of faded into oblivion, pardon the pun, now has had their proc chance removed. So this is going to trigger every time you do an attack. The volcano is going to come up and erupt. It can occur every 2 seconds. So you're going to be spawning a lot of volcanoes if you're using this set. The Soulshine set, one of my all-time favorites on my Templar over the years, now grants you less spell damage, but it grants it for 5 seconds after using a channeled or cast time ability, rather than adding it only to the spell damage, only to channeled abilities or ones that have a cast time. So now you're going to buff your overall damage more consistently instead of just buffing select skills. Stendarr's Embrace got a huge buff. It removes all negative effects now instead of 5, so this is going to be huge for PvP. And it's removed the proc chance, so this is going to trigger whenever you heal a friendly target, but it has a 30-second cooldown. So every 30 seconds, you're going to be able to remove negative status effects. That's a fairly long cooldown, so I don't know how much use this will see, but it does have a place in PvP, particularly if you have a dedicated healer, potentially. The Storm Knight's Plate set has had its damage cut nearly in half, but the upside is that there is no longer a proc chance. So now whenever you take non-physical damage, you're going to start pulsing shock around you. This means you can have 100% uptime. You can be running around just shocking everything, which is pretty cool. The Stygian set, which has been changed several times over the years, now gives you spell damage for 15 seconds after leaving stealth rather than increasing the damage done from stealth. So this is going to benefit anybody that's going into stealth in PvP that plays a Magicka build is going to gain that spell damage for 15 seconds. It's a decent buff. It's not amazing. There are better sets. As far as Scale set has increased the damage a little bit. It's increased the cooldown a little bit, but it's removed the proc chance. So now when you deal damage, you're going to get that burst of Lamia Poison dealing damage around you. So that set's going to become much more effective because it's going to trigger with regularity. Thunderbug's Carapace has also had a change. The damage is down a little bit, but the proc chance is gone. So now this is going to trigger, and it has a 3-second cooldown. So this is going to trigger a lot more regularly as well. So if you like using this set and you've been kind of frustrated with the proc chance, this should help a lot. Twin Sisters, which is one of my all-time favorite tanking sets because you can put tons of damage on enemies around you, which helps grab aggro. Now has had the proc chance removed. So this is going to trigger effectively every 10 seconds you block, which is huge. There wasn't too much problems with it before because if you're getting wailed on as a tank by 5 enemies, it tends to trigger anyway, but it is a bit of an upgrade. Unfathomable Darkness is another set that's been increased significantly. The damage has been increased by roughly 50%, and the proc chance has been removed. So this is a set that I could see getting a lot more use because it's going to be damage over time against enemies you're facing while they're dealing with you. These crows are just going to be whacking them in the face over and over, depleting their health. I could see a lot of people using this set now. War Maiden, a very popular set for Magicka users, now has the spell damage increased by 600 on magic attacks, up from 400. If you're a Templar, that's very good news. Way of Fire, another set. The damage has been slightly reduced, but the proc chance is now gone. So now every time you deal damage with a weapon, you're going to do an additional 4,000 flame damage with a 2-second cooldown. That's a lot of extra damage. Brands of Imperium got a pretty big buff. The shield size was shrunk a little bit, but the proc chance is now gone. So now when you take damage, you and your allies are going to gain a damage shield for that amount, which has a 15-second cooldown, which is a pretty good buff because this set didn't proc nearly as often as you thought it should if you've ever used it as a tank. So now there's more reason to try and use it again. Burning Spellweave, another set that's been popular throughout the years, now has had its proc chance removed. It increases your spell damage by a little bit less, but now you're going to ensure that you get it whenever you're doing flame damage. It still has a 12-second cooldown and is only up for 8 seconds, so there is a bit of gap in time that it's always up. But now when you go to refresh it, you don't have to worry about maybe getting it. The Combat Physician set got a massive buff. It reduced the size of the damage shield. However, the cooldown is now per target, meaning you can have several damage shields on several teammates at once. And as we all know, if you've ever been in a dungeon or trial, preventing damage before people take damage is the best way to prevent, your healers from panicking and for bad things from happening. So I could see this set getting much more use now. The Flame Blossom set, another proc set, now always applies the Burning Elemental status when it does. It's had its damage boosted, and it also no longer has a cooldown. So this set has become much more powerful. So it's something you may want to use if you're a Magicka player and you haven't used it in a long time. Consider checking it out again. The Glorious Defender set could see a lot more use. It's changed the way it works. Now after you bash an enemy, you have you'll dodge the next attack with a 13-second cooldown. This makes it particularly good for tanks in tough boss fights. When they see a big hit coming, they can bash, trigger that dodge, take no damage, and then gradually get that thing off cooldown and then do it again. It's a very good way for tanks to avoid taking big hits. I could see this getting more use, particularly in really tough boss fights. Hagraven's Garden is a set that most tanks didn't use just because it wasn't really that great. Now grants nearby group members major protection as well if they're inside the area, and increase the duration up to 8 seconds and reduce the cooldown by 30. So this means if you need to pack people into a tight space, you can help prevent damage taken to them, and that's extremely powerful. Hand of Mafala is another tank set that's been buffed. The damage has been increased, and the proc chance is now gone. So you're going to be reducing the enemy movement speed around you and applying minor fraction and dealing damage much more frequently. So it's a set, if you're a tank, you might want to consider using, particularly in PvP, where you're going to snare a whole bunch of people. It's definitely worth checking out now. The Haven of Ursa set has been buffed. The shield size has been increased, but now if someone triggers the synergy, it gives a damage shield for up to 5 targets. This could be huge for harder boss fights where, lots of damage is being taken if you keep triggering this regularly and providing damage shields to your teammate. So it's going to work kind of in a similar manner to Brands of Imperium. It's just they have to activate a synergy instead. The Jolting Arms set no longer has a proc chance, and it's just going to increase the damage of your next bash attack after you block and increase your physical and spell resistance every 6 seconds. That's a pretty good change. I mean, there are some niche builds that you can build around bash damage, particularly for PvP. I don't see a ton of people using this still, but it does make it so that it's more, at least attractive. The Nightmare set is another set that's been tweaked. No longer has a proc chance, and now when you deal melee damage, you apply minor maim to all enemies around you, which is great. It's going to help reduce their damage, but it's only for 2 seconds. But you can keep triggering this over and over. So this is not only good for PvP, it's also good for a tank in general. I don't know how many people will use it because it's still not super strong, but it's definitely not bad. The Lamia Song set has an interesting change. Instead of gaining health per ultimate point spent, now you're going to restore resources to up to 6 nearby group members whenever you use an ultimate. So if you're a healer, this is maybe an attractive set if you can get your ultimate off regularly, or even a tank, if you can get your ultimate off fairly regularly in order to help sustain of your group. And I could actually see, some tank or healers using this set in order to facilitate better DPS for their group. Leeching Plate just gets better and better. The damage was reduced by 20, but it no longer has a proc chance. So this set's going to be even more effective in general. If you have Leeching Plate, now's the time to just let it shine. Magicka Furnace is a set that used to restore 8,000 Magicka when you took melee damage while under 80%, which was just silly because, that effectively means you had to have 40,000 Magicka in order to get the best use of this, and you had to be hit by melee. Now it's just going to give you slightly less Magicka, but while you're under 50% from any attack. So that's definitely a good change. I think people who want to use this set will see more use out of that than what it was before. That's desperately needed. The Oblivion's Edge set got a huge buff. It used to be 1,720 damage whenever you killed an enemy. Now it's 20,621. So whenever you kill someone, you're going to gain 20,621 healing. That is a ton. The weapon damage has been increased by about double. I think it is exactly double on the 5-piece bonus. But now this set can only occur every 10 seconds. But this is absolutely outstanding for PvP, or even for a tank if you have good DPS, or even for a DPS in a dungeon. If you will no longer need healing, it's just a very good set all around, and I can see a lot of people making some very creative builds with it. Overwhelming Surge, another set that got boosted. The damage is increased, no longer has a proc chance, and the cooldown is up just slightly. So this is going to give you more regular damage when using class abilities, which is exceptional. The Pillar of Nirn set got a massive boost. The damage has been over doubled for this set. Proc chance removed. So if you're a fan of putting bleeds on enemies all over the place, this is a set you're going to want if you're a stamina DPS in dungeons. I could see this being very, very useful. The Prayer Shawl set is another set that not too many people have used over the years, and now it's going to trigger on overhealing cause rather than healing. So if you heal too much, it increases the damage shield by about double, and it removes the proc chance. So it's 100% guaranteed, but it does have a 2-second cooldown. So this is going to be, I can see this making its way into rotations a much, much more. Spell Power Cure got a huge buff. It now grants Major Courage when you overheal targets rather than having a 50% chance to grant it to them when you heal them over 100%. And it no longer has a 6-person cap, so you can use this in a trial effectively to heal a larger group as well. The Stormmaster set now increases your light and heavy attack damage by 1,542 rather than causing them to do extra shock damage. Which is good. It doesn't work with Overload, but it does increase that. So if you're trying to work out a heavy attack build or something like that, you might want to take a look at this set. They finally patched Undaunted Infiltrator and Undaunted Unweaver, which, if you remember, the light armor set had stamina bonuses and the medium armor set had the light armor bonuses of Magicka. They've since fixed this, and they've also made it so it increases the light and heavy attack damage by more, up to 680 or 1,685 for their duration, rather than smaller values for light attack and higher values for heavy attack. But both of those, 774 and 1161, were still lower than that 1685. So again, this is another set if you're making like a werewolf build, someone that uses light attacks very regularly, you could probably use the stamina version very, very effectively. The Winterborn set has increased damage. The proc chance has been removed. And now it's going to have a 6-second cooldown when this happens instead of the 4-second cooldown. And it's going to have slightly less snare. So this is a set, if you're a frost mage or whatever sort of build that uses frost damage a lot, you're going to get a lot more use out of this set. The Affliction set no longer has a proc chance, and whenever you deal damage, you're going to deal an extra 1,830 disease damage. This applies immediately, and it gives the disease status effect, which applies minor defile to the target for 4 seconds. So that's a good upgrade on that set. The Black Rose set got a bit of a buff. This set has gone through a lot of nerfs over the years, and now the Constitution passive when wearing this set is going to go up to 60% from 35%, and the weapon and spell damage is going to go up by a little bit. So it's being rebuffed again slightly. The Desert Rose set got a bit of a tweak. The proc chance has been increased to 25% from 15%, but the amount of magicka restored has been reduced by about 20%. So there's a bit of a trade-off there. The Kind's Kiss got a bit of an overhaul. Instead of having a 15% chance to proc with a 1-second cooldown, now it just does it automatically when you hit a target over 12 meters, giving the health and stamina, but it has a 5-second cooldown. So it should be much more reliable, and you should get the benefit from that set much more frequently. The Soldier of Anguish has had its proc chance removed, so now when you do melee light attacks, they place a ring on the ground and it explodes, and after 1.3 seconds, applies healing absorption to all enemies hit for 4 seconds, and this can occur for 6 seconds. The amount has been increased very, very small, but it no longer has that proc chance. The Juggernaut set definitely got a boost. The healing's been increased by a couple thousand, which isn't significant. However, the set also grants 20,000 armor for the 15 seconds after activating. So you're not only going to get the healing, but you're going to be beast mode. You're going to be very, very hard to kill, particularly in PvP where people have lots of, penetration. So this is definitely a set that you're going to want in PvP if you're trying to be a super tanky build. The Vanguard's Challenge set had a bit of a tweak to it. Now the damage done to your other allies is reduced by 35%, which is down from 50%, but also increased the damage done by you versus the target is now 30% as well, rather than 150%. This should make it a lot more usable because you're not scared to die by using it, because 35% damage to you is not nearly as much as 150%, needless to say. Vicious Death, as if this set could not get any stronger, now has an additional 1487 spell penetration on its 5-piece bonus, and has increased the damage done on kill from 15,815 to 22,400, so it's going to be even more deadly. The Wizard's Riposte set got nerfed a bit. Instead of applying Minor Maim, now it applies Minor Innervation, which just reduces the critical damage of enemies who critically strike you. It does give you more critical resistance on the 5-piece bonus, so you may see overall less damage from critical hits, but it's not going to give you a damage reduction versus that target overall. So it's very, very slightly nerfed, depending on who you're fighting, but it's not significantly changed. The Bloodspawn Monster Mask increased the armor rating by a little bit, but the ultimate gained on proc is going up to 13 from 8. I think they just reduced this in a previous patch, if I'm not mistaken, not very long ago. So now they're re-increasing it up to 13, so now you're going to gain a lot more ultimate. The Grothdar set got a bit of a nice tweak. It can only activate if you're within 8 meters of an enemy when you deal damage in the first place. So if you hit with like a ranged attack and then use a gap closer, you're not going to waste time with this triggering when you're not on top of an enemy. So you got to be right on top of them to trigger it. I think a lot of people are going to like that change. Falcon Square, you got an interesting fix here. I'm only mentioning it because I've noticed this using this set because it's one of my favorite all-time sets. It says fixed an issue where the set had a lower proc chance than listed. Any of you who ever felt it was always lower than what is listed, you are indeed validated. You were right. It never triggered as much as you thought. So that has now been fixed in this update. It didn't take long to nerf Thracian Stranglers. The spell damage granted per stack is now down to 92 from 150. This is about a 40% reduction. And the penalties per stack goes down from 1% to 1% from 2%. So that is, if you're going to nerf it a little bit, at least it nerfs the penalties, which is great. And the stacks from the set now last 30 seconds and refresh every time you gain a stack rather than being permanent. So it's not going to just last forever and you're going to have to re-queue this up. So this is a pretty big nerf to this thing. But it also does grant weapon damage now. So you're going to be able to use it on a stamina character, but it's going to be less effective in general for builds that use it overall than it was before. Overall, these are a staggering amount of changes. I get the feeling a lot of these were done to improve performance. If you read through the patch notes, they're talking about having to check for proc scenarios, and they've removed those proc chances from a lot of sets. I think that's going to help with performance overall in Cyrodiil, hopefully, as well as other places in the game. But this is sets on steroids. If you're like me and you haven't played the game for a while because it's kind of stagnant and the meta has stagnated a bit in terms of what sets to use and what builds to use, this is going to shake it up. You can go out and create all kinds of new builds with these sets. I'm very excited. I'd fully expect to be doing some more builds for this very, very soon because I really want to get in and test some of these things out and see how well they perform. So if you're like me and you haven't played for a bit, maybe this is the time to get back in and check some of these things out, dust off some of these old sets, that you've been sitting in your bank for God knows how long, and now try them out and see if they work for you. Usually when these patches come to PTS, they get some more tweaks. So again, these are not finalized, but these changes should be coming to live server sometime in the next 4 to 6 weeks on PC and maybe slightly after on console. So get ready for that. It's going to be madness when this happens.